Welcome back to the Sweepstakes College Baseball Podcast, where we have now gotten through 3 full weeks of college baseball. Top teams are still doing top team things, but I just wanted to start things off by highlighting some of the great performers over the weekend. Most of them surrounded the tournaments in Houston and Dallas, a few others sprinkled in, but primarily LSU got off to a great weekend doing some amazing things and a lot of close games, but showed that they were a top team right off the bat, winning all of them, as well as TCU staying undefeated, even though had a lot of battles to get through. That 12-0 speaks for itself. We'll be talking about that later. And then, another team to highlight maybe some Vanderbilt and Alabama action. Both teams did really well. Vanderbilt finally putting together a just complete weekend overall and week in general. And then I guess lastly, maybe DBU also had a really good tournament weekend. Showed that they deserve to be a ranked team. Any teams that you would specifically like to highlight here at the start?
No, I think you covered the main ones there, but yeah, these round robin tournament things to start off the year are awesome. Really gets these teams a little preview of what regionals are like. Playing a new team every day, and so it's different than your typical weekend series, and it's cool to see some good competition from opposing conferences.
Yeah, it's better than just seeing the top teams just playing absolute nobodies like a lot of other teams do in normal weeks before conference play starts. And I guess another team maybe to mention is Clemson, just because they went up against South Carolina in 2 games. Could have been a full series, but one game got postponed or canceled, so only able to play two, but won them both. And really competitive series overall. But Clemson just able to eke out the wins there. But jumping now into our player of the week, we'll start things off with Riley Huge with the huge performance, starting pitcher for Winthrop, 7 2/3 innings and 20 strikeouts. That speaks for itself. Also, no earned runs and only 1 hit given up. It was against Maine, but they have a few decent players in there, so being able to limit it to just 1 hit and getting 20 Ks is super impressive, and that's the first time that's happened since I think 2017 for a pitcher to do that over a 1 game span. So just overall super impressive, and there weren't any really huge performances out of like top teams facing really good competition. So this one spoke out to us a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's just impressive to throw that many strikeouts. Probably not quite as impressive as Hagen Smith last week, considering that was against top-notch competition, but still just incredible game he threw there. And yeah, I mean, anytime you have a performance like that, you're gonna get some attention nationally.
Yeah, for sure. And now we'll jump in to the top play of the week, which we'll show the clip now.
He drives one to left, towards the Crawford boxes, gone by! Down to their final out! Texas State does it again! Yesterday a ninth-inning homer to tie and an extra-inning homer to win. And Lugo with a 2-run shot put Texas State back in front.
So here we had Aaron Lugo, the third baseman for Texas State, scoring the eventual winning run by hitting that 2-run bomb, while also blowing a bubble against Texas. So great competition, and just had some swagger in him that you got to highlight here.
Yeah, it's just casual for the guy. I mean, who needs to lock in when you can be blowing bubbles up to bat? But I mean, that whole round robin there was awesome. A lot of really close games and games back and forth at the very end, and this was definitely the highlight of the weekend, that tournament, and maybe the moment for the entire country, like we have it as the play of the week.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the thing was, a lot of those games didn't look close for a while, and then somehow one team brought it back, and then there was back and forth at the very end. So crazy games all around. And jumping into our setback, the sweep setback of the week, we have staying in kind of that area. Texas just losing a bunch of close games versus good competition. Really could have easily scraped out 2 wins from the weekend and ended up winless. So pretty brutal there, and for a team that's vying to potentially be one of the top teams, if not the top team in their conference in the Big 12, it's definitely a setback losing against other solid competition.
Yeah, I mean it's against good competition, so it's not the end of the world. But I think this Texas team is a team with Omaha aspirations this year, and so to get swept is not really a good look if you want to be performing well against the top competition and have a good outlook for the rest of the year and through the postseason.
Yeah, I mean, it's Texas. They're always looking for Omaha. If they don't get to Omaha, it's somewhat of a disappointment. Not many other teams can say that. So, yeah, being in somewhat of a regional environment or, even Omaha atmosphere, something like that, it's definitely not what you want to see, but it's early in the season. They definitely had some positives to take away from it, but definitely a little bit of a setback there in comparison to other teams in the top 25. And now we'll just go straight into our predictions from last week, where we chose 5 different series, starting with Clemson versus South Carolina. One of the few ranked versus ranked series, ended up only being 2 games, but still was decisive for Clemson. So you get the tally mark there. I unfortunately guessed South Carolina, and this is just the start of a pretty bad week of predictions for myself. But I just wanted to give you some room to catch up here, and you did a decent job at that to tighten the gap. After that, we have what was ranked UC Santa Barbara, still could be. You never know. You'll have to wait in the podcast to know that further. Going to Oregon, and we had both of us Oregon winning the series. That did not happen. They were able to scrape away the final game, but UCSB did win the first 2. So both of us didn't have an amazing week, we'll say, but you at least started a little stronger.
Yeah, I mean, especially that Clemson South Carolina series. If that was a 3-game series, could have been the series of the weekend. Both just incredibly tight games and 2 really talented clubs, and so that was a fun series altogether. And then the Oregon Santa Barbara one, not quite as close, and both on the wrong end of that one. We thought Oregon might have the edge being at home there, but Santa Barbara kind of gets it back on track. Still just a 2-2 week though, so we'll see what happens to them.
Yeah, it seems like they just consistently put up like 2 weeks, which, facing the competition that they have faced isn't terrible, but you kind of just need to rack up those wins early in the season, especially as a mid-major. But going on to our next series, we had number 2 Florida at Miami. Felt like this was the most locked-in series, at least from my perspective. We both chose Florida. We were both right. I said that it could be a sweep. Obviously, it was not, with Miami getting the second game. So it was a lot more competitive than maybe I thought, but still get the win there.
Yeah, I think actually came away from that series feeling a little bit better about Miami than I thought initially. They looked pretty competitive for the most part, and I think we're still very high on Florida altogether. And not a crazy impressive week from them, but that's a good series win against some talented competition.
Yeah, for sure. Not just taking the easy road there and facing nobody's actually doing what they should be doing and facing tough competition in the early season. And then jumping to the second to last series that we predicted, Iowa at Ole Miss. I chose Iowa, you chose Ole Miss. I just thought Iowa would be able to get that first win on Friday and kind of use that as momentum. They got the win, but it did not work for any sort of momentum, and Ole Miss was able to scrap away the series.
Yeah, I think I really just had faith in Iowa's pitching staff to kind of continue to blunder, and Ole Miss hasn't been quite on top of their game the last year or so, but the offense has still been clicking at times, and they kind of had it going the weekend before. Thought it might carry over, and unfortunately for myself, it did.
Yeah, and then the last series that we predicted, Georgia versus Georgia Tech rivalry. We both had Georgia Tech winning it. We thought that maybe the spark that they brought in from previous games would be able to continue through that, but Georgia was just too much for them. And competitive for the most part, but Georgia definitely looked like the more solid team overall.
Yeah, I feel like both of these teams were kind of on the fringe top 25 for us before going into this series, and unfortunately, we only got 2 games out of it. But Georgia still was able to take control and just looks like the more complete team at this point in time, at least.
Yeah, for sure. And so we'll have our next week's weekend season predictions coming out later this week, so keep an eye out for that. But before that, we will get through our new rankings. You can see them posted prior to this podcast on Twitter and also on our YouTube page. All the rankings get posted prior to us recording this. But here we go, going through it. The top pretty much stayed relatively consistent, a little bit of movement here and there. But starting and staying at number 1 was Wake Forest. They had a 4-0 week against, pretty average, below average competition with a few games that were relatively close, but still getting all those wins there. So didn't feel any need to jump any other teams up.
Yeah, Wake hasn't looked ultra impressive to start this year yet, but I think we still have faith in them being the most talented team in the country right now. And it's kind of hard to get up for these mediocre competition games early in the season. But this week coming up, they're going against Duke, so they're gonna have to get ready. Gonna have to step up and be ready for some tough competition. And I think we're both really looking forward to that one.
Yeah, and nothing has been like super glaring and obvious for problems with this Wake Forest team. Just they haven't really been clicking at full force, but they still look like a very solid team overall. So yeah, and then going to now number 2, we have Arkansas moving up 1 spot from where they were, even though they were facing lesser competition and they won all 4 games this week. It's really a testament to how they did last week in their little round robin tournament. And I think that they were just waiting for a spot to open up. And Florida, like we mentioned a little earlier, did stumble a little bit, especially in the midweek games. We felt like at this point we've seen enough where Arkansas maybe deserves it a little bit more since they faced better competition.
Yeah, I mean, early in the year when a lot of these guys aren't playing super tough competition, Arkansas did the previous week, but this week against some lesser competition. But I mean, most of the top teams have only really had one weekend at most against tough teams. A lot of it comes down to the eye test. And I think right now Arkansas certainly passes that for us and looks like one of the best teams in the country, and just looks like they're playing at a little bit of a higher level right now, and that's why we felt comfortable moving them up.
Yeah, and similarly, right behind Arkansas is LSU, jumping up 1 spot. They definitely passed the eye test this past weekend, where they had their tough competition facing Texas, who is ranked, Louisiana, who looked like a really solid ball club, and also Texas State in kind of that same category. Just overall, all those teams look super competitive, and LSU able to go 4-0 with a midweek win as well was pretty impressive.
Yeah, got some quality wins there. I mean, that whole round robin, even some little lesser known names like Houston, Louisiana, both those clubs looked pretty solid there, and so there's definitely some tough competition there. And yeah, LSU looks like they really haven't missed a step since last year for the most part. I mean, not quite on the same level, missing those top 2 guys, but still just look like a really good team.
Yeah, and now at 4, dropping back 2 spots is Florida. They went 3-2 on the week, losing one of their midweeks to Stetson, which was not the best look, and then winning the series at Miami. So dropping another game there. So not super impressive. Still a decent overall week, but would like to see probably a 4-1. If they're able to get that, might be able to stay in that 2 spot. But with especially winning or losing that first game of the season, they're starting to rack up a few more losses than the teams around them. So felt like dropping them a few spots, especially with the flock of teams kind of from that 5 to 10 spot, which are also right behind them.
Yeah, I feel like Florida is actually in a similar boat to Wake for us right now, where super talented team, and I think they're going to be doing really well by the end of the year, but just haven't really been clicking on all cylinders right now. And unfortunately for Florida, unlike Wake, they've actually dropped a few games, and so haven't been pulling off all the wins. Still not a bad week, but just had to drop them a little here. And I think we both think they'll clean things up moving forward, and will still be one of the best teams in the country.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that much movement at this point. It's just a few spots. A lot of other polls had already moved them down from previous weeks with seeing how good LSU and Arkansas looked at the start of the year. So I feel like, yeah, we're just a little movement here and there. And similarly with that, we have TCU jumping up one spot to 5 over Oregon State now. Undefeated. Felt like at this point, if you're undefeated and you were a top 10 team, you should start climbing a little bit. Even if the teams around just have like one more loss, something like that. But TCU has been facing pretty decent competition. They went through the Pac-12 gauntlet this week with 5 Pac-12 games. And yeah, was able to win all of them. A lot of close games, but somehow able to get the job done in all of them.
Yeah, TCU's actually had quite a few close games to start this year, but like you said, still dogged the Pac-12 this week, 5-0 against them, and still playing some pretty solid competition. Not top 25 teams this week, but good ball clubs, and yeah, they keep pulling out the wins, and they do look like they have a lot of pieces on that team. So
yeah, and then at 6, like I mentioned, Oregon State dropping down one spot. Even though they went 4-0 on the week, it was against North Dakota State, and most of their games were pretty much non-competitive. Yeah, they were routing them for the most part, but they do have that one loss, even though it is a good loss to Arkansas. This TCU team has just been kind of getting the job done, but I mean, Oregon State right there and should be able to continue to prove that they're kind of the tier above everything else in the Pac-12.
yeah, Oregon State got down early in a couple of those games this weekend, but by the later 2/3 of the game, it really wasn't a problem. Still dominated every game, and yeah, looked very good. Like you said, their one loss is to Arkansas, so not a bad loss whatsoever, and it was an extremely competitive game. So certainly feel comfortable with them hanging with any top competition moving forward.
Yep, and then at 7, we have Tennessee staying in that spot. 4-0 this weekend against, bad competition, no close games at all. So not really any place to move up or down. Yeah, with that happening, it's just want to see them face maybe some better teams, but they did have one week where they were in a tournament. So, at this point, just kind of racking up the wins to start SEC playoff right.
Yeah, I mean, this is a team that played some decent competition in the first week, but since then they haven't really. And this is a team that I'm really intrigued to see play some top competition, because I do think they're really good, but not really sure how so yet. I mean, they haven't really been tested on that level, but once we get into SEC play here soon, it'll be interesting to see.
Yep, and then right behind them at 8 is another SEC team, Texas A&M. Also undefeated, just like TCU. They're 11-0. They went 4-0 the past week, and also faced a decent amount of Pac-12 teams going against Arizona State, USC. I guess Arizona State twice, and looked super impressive for the entire week against what should be decent competition. The pitching staff, which was somewhat of a question mark coming into the year, still hasn't given up a home run. The differential right now is 22-0. So Texas A&M really lighten it up in that category, and if they're able to continue doing that, it's just proves that they've solidified something that was their main question mark and should be a super good team in the SEC.
Yeah, this is a team that hasn't played great competition so far, similar to a lot of these top teams, but they certainly passed the eye test right now, and I think I'm higher on them right now than I was going into the year. They really seem to be clicking and playing well. Hopefully it's not a case where we see them fall off after a hot start, but right now it's looking good.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be tough to, be a top team in the SEC, but they've shown that they definitely have the potential to do that. And then right after that, at 9, we have Duke just flip-flopping spots with Texas A&M. They went 3-1, picking up their first loss of the year to Akron over the weekend. So really shouldn't have been competitive games, and most of them weren't, but losing that one felt like Texas A&M was kind of right behind Duke for the past few weeks, so just gave them a little bit of ability to jump them there.
Yeah, I feel like in this top 10, And then especially like after the top 3 or 4, maybe there's really not much separation. A lot of these teams are really tight on where we have them and how they've been playing so far, and so just losing a simple game to a team like Akron just drops them a spot there. But overall, not concerning, and huge weekend ahead to prove themselves going at Wake. So that'll be super eventful and should be really intriguing.
Yeah, should be a pitcher's duel, but we'll see what happens. If that Wake offense can wake up, then it could be a difficult week for Duke to be able to compete. But, they have all the ability to do so. But after that, another ACC team in that 10 spot. We have Clemson jumping up 3 spots. They went 3-0 the past week, beating USC Upstate in the midweek, and then also facing South Carolina, who we had at number 15 last week, winning both their games. Super close, 1-run games, both of them. I'm just really impressed by the ability to close it out and win both games against ranked South Carolina.
Yes, I think it says a lot when you're in those tight games against tough competition, and they certainly looked built for the moment, and looked like they had some mental fortitude in that little 2-game series there, and both really good wins. And yeah, I think for me at least after this 10 spot with Clemson, there's just a little bit of a drop, but Clemson's really solidified themselves as a top 10 team right now.
Yeah, for sure. And then at 11, another ACC team, might be a little bit of a run here, with NC State 5-0 the past week against worse competition than a lot of teams around them. So staying in that 11 spot, didn't feel like they should be above Clemson at this point with just the teams that they've faced and how they've performed overall. But definitely a team that should be at the top of the ACC.
Yeah, they haven't looked overly impressive thus far this season, but still racking up wins and taking care of business for the most part. Just nothing overly impressive to this point. I think it's another team that don't really think is clicking on all cylinders yet, but has a lot of upside.
Yep, and similarly, another ACC team staying in the same spot at 12. We have Virginia. They went 3-1 the past week, had a super competitive series over the weekend against UMass, so not an amazing week, all things considered. Since a few of those games could have gone either way, and they did lose one of them, so not the best look overall, but still able to pull out a 3-1 week. So could have definitely been worse.
Yeah, definitely a weekend we would have liked to see a little bit cleaner from them. Might have been a little bit of a hangover from the previous weekend where they played really well against some solid competition. Might have had trouble getting up for this weekend and being ready to compete, but still really good club and still have a lot of wins so far through this year.
Yep. And then at 13, we have East Carolina dropping back 3 spots, essentially just flip-flopping with Clemson there. They went 2-2 the past week. At Old Dominion, picked up a loss, and then won versus Purdue and Cal State Fullerton, but then lost their final game of the week against Southeastern Louisiana. So not a great week considering the competition was all right, but not great. And for a mid-major, you don't have that much room to slip up. So if they want to be considered a team that could be in the top 10 and vying for a spot to go to the College World Series, they definitely need to clean things up against lesser competition a little bit.
Yeah, this really wasn't a good week, and they only dropped 3 spots, but I think that has a lot to do with them winning that series against North Carolina previously. If it wasn't for that, I think you would have seen them get punished a little bit more for a sloppy week like that. But in the end, it really is about how you perform against these top teams. You'd love to see them take care of business against the lesser opponents, but if you're continually playing well against top teams, then you're going to stay in the rankings and stay up high. So they just need to continue to take care of business.
Yeah, for sure. And then at 14, a team that finally did take care of business with a 5-0 week. Vanderbilt was able to put something together here against really good competition overall. Midweek against Indiana State, where they were dominant, and then weekend round robin series against Louisiana, Houston, and ranked Texas, winning all those games. And yeah, it looks like this team finally got everything clicking, and if they're able to continue along that path, they kind of showed their potential this weekend, and yeah, they could be a top SEC team if things continue like this.
Yeah, I think this weekend was a really good sign. I mean, last year they were still solid. Obviously hosted a regional, but never really felt like they quite had that it factor last year. And I think this weekend was the first time we've kind of seen them have that swagger back in a while, and looked like they were having fun with it and playing really well. Had that incredible comeback against Texas. Um, so that was an awesome game, and yeah, good week altogether.
Yeah, and then following them going up 2 spots as well is Alabama, another SEC team. They went 3-1 on the week. Also played in a little tournament. Faced what was ranked Indiana. They might be dropping out. We'll see what happens with them. Won that game. Also beat Arizona and then lost to DBU as their final game. But decent week overall against good competition. So definitely deserved to jump up over some of the teams that had a little bit worse weeks.
Yeah, picked up some quality wins, and DBU's not a bad loss at all. Plus, it was in extra innings, so super competitive game on the last day of the weekend, and yeah, looking like a solid club right now. May not be at the upper echelon of the SEC, but they're close there, and one of the better teams in the conference for sure.
Yeah, and then at 16, we have North Carolina jumping up 3 spots. Went 5-0 on the week. Didn't face amazing competition, but spots just opened up for them to be able to capitalize there, and they did their job by not losing any games. And yeah, their record now is at 10-2. So overall, pretty good spot, especially since they faced East Carolina earlier a few weeks ago. So yeah, overall decent, and was able to take advantage of other teams not playing great.
Yeah, just took care of business and took advantage of some sloppiness ahead of them in the rankings, and have two of the better losses in the country with both coming against East Carolina. So, yeah, looking like a solid team right now, and yeah, playing well for the most part.
Yep, and then at 17 we have Texas Tech. Started the season out unranked, but has been climbing up ever since. They went 3-0 the past week against Gardner Webb, so nothing crazy. No games were really that close at all, so was against bad competition, but they've shown week in, week out that when they're facing bad competition, they don't let it slip, and they are really putting up a lot of runs in a lot of those games. So proving that they have a very good offense if they're going against teams that might not have the best pitching, but definitely one of the better offenses we've seen so far this year.
Yeah, most of the good teams should be picking up wins like this when they're playing lesser competition, but Texas Tech is definitely passing the eye test right now, especially on the offensive side of things. Scored 29 runs in a game this weekend, just after scoring 32 in a game last weekend. So this offense is putting up crazy numbers, and if they continue to do that once they get into conference play and are playing good teams, maybe not quite that many runs, but continue to put up big numbers, they could be in conversation for one of the best offenses in the country, and they certainly have a chance to prove it this weekend going against Texas.
Yep, and then at 18, we have South Carolina dropping back 3 spots after having a all right week. I mean, lost both their games versus ranked Clemson, so really tough losing both those, especially by both of them by 1 run. So would have really liked to see them at least scrap away one win. They were super close back and forth at the end. Just was able to not grasp anything there, but able to win their midweek. So didn't want to drop them back too much, especially with how competitive everything was.
Yeah, didn't come away from this week feeling bad about South Carolina whatsoever. Yeah, like we've said, both the games against Clemson were super competitive, and looked like a regional or super regional type atmosphere, especially with those big crowds there, and so it was high energy and good baseball, and yeah, they looked pretty solid even though it was a 0-2 week on the weekend.
Yep, and then at 19 we have DBU, Dallas Baptist, jumping into the rankings. Didn't have them ranked last week, but here they are, 10-1 overall, 3-1 the past week, and the whole week they played good competition. Were able to beat Oklahoma State in midweek and then beat Arizona as well as ranked Alabama. Their one loss was against what was ranked Indiana, so unfortunate there, but super competitive games. A great week against good competition overall.
Yeah, definitely some quality wins here, and it's good to see DBU back in the rankings, and program that's been there quite often fairly recently, but good to see them taking on some tough competition early in the year and taking advantage of that round robin format.
Yeah, and then at 20 we have our setback of the week. Texas, after going 1-3 the past week, now they're 7-4 overall. Their one win was against St. John's during the midweek, and once again they lost to LSU, Texas State, and Vanderbilt. So really, really rough weekend, especially considering that they definitely could have won 2 games, if not all 3. Just all super competitive and just weren't able to get any wins at the end of the day.
Yeah, not feeling terrible about Texas after this weekend. It's especially hard to really have your bullpen rotation shaped out early in the year. You don't know what guys are in what roles quite yet, and saw them let some games slip late. Could be a factor there, but yeah, moving forward, you definitely want to see them close games like that out. But not the end of the world. They just they got some tough competition this weekend to bounce back and try and right things as well. So
Yeah, definitely have a chance to bounce back, especially with Texas A&M in the midweek and then Texas Tech on the weekend. So have the opportunity, but it's going to be tough to be able to even stay ranked. I mean, 2-2 probably keeps them in the rankings, but yeah, it'll be tough to be able to get those wins there against that tough competition. And then at 21, we have Coastal Carolina jumping into the rankings. Maybe we were a little bit harsh last week not bringing them in. But they proved it this week, going 4-0, beating Campbell midweek, so beating a ranked team, pretty impressive, and then sweeping Liberty, who seems like they could be a pretty solid squad overall. So yeah, getting those wins, super impressive, and definitely deserve to jump in the rankings this week.
yeah, they were right on the fringe for us last week, but just wanted to see them prove it one more week. And yeah, certainly looks like they're back on the right track. Had that one rough weekend, but I mean, it was losses to Duke and Indiana, so really quality losses there. And yeah, they certainly look like they're back on the track to be reaching that potential we thought they had.
Yep, for sure. Then at 22, we have UC Irvine, 9-0 overall, went 3-0 the past week, beating San Diego, Michigan, and UCLA. So faced decent competition, and for a mid-major team, you want to see them do well in those games where it's teams that they should probably be beating if they want to be considered a top mid-major school. And yeah, they got the job done there, and especially against a team like UCLA, who was also vying for a ranking last week and was ranked for a lot of previous weeks for us. So yeah, they got the job done there and proved it a little bit more that they deserve to be ranked.
Yeah, this team got snubbed from regionals last year, but certainly looks like they've carried the momentum from playing well at the end of last year, and look like they're on the track to be putting together a good season this year. And good to see them take care of some pretty decent competition this weekend. No ranked teams, but still some solid ball clubs, and to come away with 3 wins was impressive.
Yep, and then at 23 we have Auburn, also jumping up 2 spots like UC Irvine. Went 3-1 on the week, beating Samford midweek and then winning the series against UConn. So decent competition overall. Seems like UConn could be a decent team. They have been past few years. The record isn't great, but they have faced a lot of good squads so far. So yeah, Auburn got the job done there. Got 3 wins, kind of what you'd expect from a team like that in the competition they faced. So able to rise up a few spots there.
Yeah, just a solid week from Auburn, looking like a good team, and yeah, another one that's not quite on the upper end of the SEC, but still a really good team, and could beat anyone on any given weekend.
Yep, and then at 24, we have Campbell dropping back 3 spots from last week. They went 2-2 on the week, losing at Coastal Carolina and then winning the series at Georgia Southern. So really rough start to the week. They lost the first 2 games, but was able to bounce back and even things out at 2-2. So overall, deserved probably to stay in the rankings for at least one more week, but if they struggle a little bit more in the coming weeks, might happen to drop out there. But they have faced decent competition overall and have done relatively well. but this week was a little bit of a backward step.
Yeah, definitely not the best week, but kept them in the rankings due to them playing some tough competition so far. And yeah, like you said, doing relatively well. Would like to see them step it up just a little bit to make sure they hang in here, but still a good team and one of the cooler teams in the country since they're bringing a weight room with them on the road as well.
Yeah, gotta love it. And then lastly, in our top 25, we have Georgia jumping in the rankings. First week that they're ranked, they're 10-1 overall. They got their first loss this week against Michigan State in the midweek, but was able to win 2 games versus Georgia. So super impressive there. Able to bounce back after making up for a pretty abysmal weekday performance against Michigan State, but really good, solid wins versus Georgia Tech, and have probably the best wins so far out of the teams that were maybe vying for that last spot. But we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, there was quite a few teams trying to get in this last spot here at top 25, but yeah, like you said, a lot of them just haven't really played great competition yet, and not that Georgia's played super tough competition, but they just have better quality wins as of right now, and this weekend was pretty impressive. Although Georgia Tech wasn't a ranked team, still a solid team, and to win both was a good look for Georgia.
Yeah, definitely. If Georgia Tech was able to win those games, maybe we see them in the rankings there, but Georgia was able to solidify their spot for now. But the team's right on their tail. Florida State is one, undefeated so far, 10-0. Haven't faced great teams, but you can't really look past being undefeated. Another team similarly is Louisiana Tech. Has a good series coming up this week that we might highlight, but they're 11-0 overall, 4-0 the past week against what was decent competition, but this was their first week where it was actually potentially all right teams. A lot of bad teams that they faced previously, so definitely want to see them consistently prove that they're a solid squad. And then the probably last team that is pretty close to being ranked, with a few teams kind of dropping back last week that we might have mentioned previously, is Kentucky for me at 10-1, 4-0 the past week. Also another SEC team that just has racked up the wins by facing lesser competition, but 10-1 speaks for itself. And so they're close to being ranked in my books.
Yeah, those ones are all close for me as well. I think the closest ones that dropped out right now are probably Indiana and Santa Barbara for me. Uh, Both trying to hang around there, and Santa Barbara didn't have the worst week. It was 2-2, but uh, you know with a 5-5 record, it's hard to keep you in the rankings. You can't just go 500 and be one of the best teams in college baseball. They've played tough competition, but the overall record just needs to be better.
Yeah, and similarly with UCLA also dropping out of the rankings at 5-5, just not good enough to stay ranked for the time being. Haven't faced amazing teams, and yeah, just haven't got the job done. Obviously, they got swept by TCU, which was a lot of those losses, but you got to get the job done somewhere, and they haven't done it yet. Yeah, and Indiana had a terrible week last week. Probably maybe the other team that was up for our setback of the week, as they were 18th, and now they're out of the rankings. But yeah, as 1-3, losing to pretty much all the good teams they faced, as well as Purdue Fort Wayne midweek, was a pretty rough one. Maybe getting that win midweek keeps them in the rankings, probably does, over a team like Georgia, just because they haven't faced the best competition, while Indiana has consistently faced decent teams. They just can't really have a week like that with not that much room to maneuver in the Big Ten.
Yeah, especially with how big some of those losses were for Indiana. I mean, if you're getting 10-run ruled 2 times in a week, it's really not a good look. And if they were competitive games, even at 1-3, maybe they stay in there and just hang in. If you have some close games with some ranked competition, but if you're getting blown out, it's a tough look and hard to really validate that ranking.
Yeah, definitely have to look back at that and try to figure things out and make sure you're not reeling after a bad week like that. Especially, also losing the midweek is pretty brutal against a bad team there. So that concludes the ranking section of the podcast and finishes off everything. I mean, we'll have our predictions coming out later this week for the upcoming series, highlighted by Duke at Wake Forest and Texas at Texas Tech, with a few good other series that we'll bring in as well. But yeah, if you made it this far, be sure to like, subscribe. It would help us out a lot. And yeah, stay tuned for some more content.